Well, it's 6:47 according to my clock, and I'm going to go ahead and kick us off so that we can get in all the content we have planned for you tonight. First, I'd like for Richard Phillips, he is our new Membership and Hospitality Chair, to welcome our new members this month and recognize them. We've already done that a little bit, but perhaps they could introduce themselves. Richard, you're on mute. Richard.
Bad Richard.
There we go. Sorry about that. Somebody walked in my office and I had to put myself on mute. There I am. Hey guys. We've had actually 4 new members this month and 3 have decided to join us tonight. So as I call on you, just give us a quick 30-second or so introduction to who you are and how you found us. So let's start with Jürgen.
Okay. Well, I found you on the Johns Creek magazine.
Fantastic.
And, yeah, I was hoping to be something relatively close to us, which it is. And I've been messing around with photography for probably a little over 50 years. And that's not a full-time thing, that's on and off. Of course, starting with film and doing my own processing. Then I got into color processing. And anyway, at different times, I did quite a bit of photography. You know, I did a couple of weddings, did some advertising shots for a friend of mine. He had a printing company, but that was many years ago. And then I got away from it for quite some time. And then I got back into when the digital age started. And I shot Nikon most of my life, and then I switched to the Sony system. And I'm ready to start polishing my photography a little bit, more of like making pictures instead of taking pictures.
Yeah.
I just take a little more time on my subjects and, you know, do a better job.
Well, Jürgen, we're really glad to have you join. David Schilling.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you fine.
Good. Well, I was searching around, you know, looking at the Peachtree Corners magazine, of course, and found the link to your club. And I retired from photography. I had a studio for 34 years in Atlanta, and I retired 4 years ago. And quite frankly, I just wanted to get away from everything for a while. So I just basically got myself involved in exercising, playing sports, primarily pickleball, and became, you know, just sort of, you know, doing that kind of lifestyle. And I guess when the pandemic hit, I became extremely bored with everything because I wasn't getting together with everybody anymore. And suddenly it just dawned on me, you know, I'd like to get together with some folks that you know, share the same interests. You know, when I found the club, I said, well, maybe I'll give this a shot, see how everything goes there. And you know, here I am.
Well, we're glad to have you, David. And I know you and I have been having some other conversations, so we'll continue to have that along the line with references.
Yeah.
And Bob Walker is a brand new member, and he was, I believe, wanting to have his photography looked at tonight. So I think that'll be even a cool thing, Bob. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you for that, Richard. I retired in 2016. I had nothing to do with photography my whole life other than just family photos. So photography is a hobby, and I've taken a few courses at Emory, their night classes, the extended education curriculum there, and increasing the interest in COVID really inspired me more to go out. When we were told to lock down, I was out with the camera. I do use a Sony. I have an Alpha 7R M3 that I use for photography, and I was in search of a club. I explored different options all around the area, including down in Atlanta. And your website and the pictures, the community involvement, and the fact that I'm often on the other side of the river peering over at your side because I live over on the Johns Creek side. And I venture over there in the early spring to pick up some of the ephemerals along the river there. So I was interested in looking at your club, and then I ran into a guy named Barry Smith, who knows Ludwig very well. And Barry actually cleaned my sensor a couple weeks back and said he recommended highly I consider joining your group, and I came right home and signed up. Then I saw you had the February contest, so I just plopped a picture out there. I just took. My son recently moved to Tiger, Georgia, population 412, including their 3. And they live up on top of a mountain up there, but he is absolutely loving it. And the picture I put up tonight was from Minnehaha Falls, which is in the area where he lives. And he is escorting me to all these beautiful places I've never experienced before. So I'm anxious to experience more of the ones that he's seen. That's enough about me. I think I'll pass it back to you, Richard. Thank you very much for inviting
All right, Bob. And I know Tiger well. It's on my way to when I go up to Silva, so we'll maybe stop by. Well, that would be your son. Anyway, all right. Next on our agenda is Brian has some exciting news to talk about, an expansion to meetings that we're going to be holding. Brian?
All right, so first thing to talk about here is the webinars that Tracy kind of introduced. The idea here is we wanted to kind of expound the offering of what we have here at the club. You know, we do these weekly gatherings where we, or the monthly gatherings where we, you know, meet and have presentation and stuff like that. But the idea here is to do a little something a little more technical webinars, and you know, technical depends, I guess, somewhat is somewhat open-ended here. I went ahead and put down some of the topics that were, we haven't completely finalized this yet, but this is kind of what we're thinking about and aiming towards for the list and things that we're going to cover. The format is effectively going to be approximately, you know, 40-45 minutes or so for presenting on the very strategic topic, and they will be either pre-recorded or live, you know, talks, demonstrations, that kind of thing, depending on the presenter that we have and the format that they choose to do. And then we're going to post it where we kind of live on these fourth Tuesdays, either play back that recording or have that live presentation, and there'll be chat involved. So it's kind of, that will certainly be the live aspect, you know, at all of them, is where you can chat and ask questions about what's being presented on. And if you have, you know, kind of a QA for a few minutes at the end. So we're kind of going to block off about an hour or so for the meeting. And that'll give some time for, you know, a little question and answer. And our hope here is that we're just all kind of diving a little bit deeper into photography, getting a little more technical thing, especially COVID here, is since our meetings are kind of remote and sometimes feel short in terms of us getting to cover like the details of a particular topic. This effectively provides us a platform to do that. So we're hoping that this provides some education as well as kind of some community involvement between us. We'll have different presenters here, and we'll also have hopefully people will show up and kind of get that interaction of feedback between the presenters and our community, and kind of so that we all learn some things. I mean, there's stuff on this list that you know, even as a presenter, I'm someone who's going to be learning, and even as I, you know, study up to make a presentation or something like that, you know, I'm going to be learning and advancing my skills, and I kind of hope that everyone wants to kind of join us on that journey as we all kind of seek to get better in different aspects of photography, and also to just expand our knowledge. I mean, some of this may not be related to you know, you feeling like there's something that you're sort of getting better at one specific piece, but it may expand your knowledge and understanding of photography in a particular area and that kind of thing. So that's kind of the goal. And this is the general expectation on what we're going to have for the rollout of when they're going to happen. So 4th Tuesdays of every month. And that's kind of the idea. So next thing on my agenda here is we have show and tell, and kind of with the monthly theme here. And so what I'm going to do is each of these has the title card of who took the photo, and so that will kind of cue you up to be ready to talk. So when you see your name, you know, get ready to unmute yourself, because you're going to have, you know, probably about 60 seconds here or so to tell your story about the photo, because that's as we had enough of these provided that we don't have a whole lot of time, you know, to dedicate to each one, but definitely wanted to give everyone that provided the photo the opportunity to do so. So I'll just kind of, you know, click through once the time's up, and, you know, move on to the next one kind of deal. So Alfonso, you are number one here.
Oh boy. Hey, how you doing? I took this picture in the Cherokee Skyway that runs between Tennessee and North Carolina. It had snowed the day before. You can see the snow at the bottom, and it was just an incredible view. There is nothing done to this picture. No, it's just contrast and density, and that's what I saw. It's an incredible place, and I you know, invite you to go there, because the views are fantastic. This is at 5,500 feet, 400 feet. Yeah, Cherokee Skyway in Tennessee. So that's it. Thank
Cool,
you.
thanks. Yeah, thank you, Alfonso. Appreciate it. Bob Walker, you are up.
Okay, still remember, this is a hobby. Just joined the club. This is my first submission, taken 2 weeks ago up at Minnehaha Falls. You don't see any snow. There's no ice. I call this winter in Georgia. I grew up in Pittsburgh. It's not winter down here at all. So I did capture the falls, and there's a lot of water coming down at this time of year. And I held the shutter open for a half a second to get that silky flow. And it was taken with a 90 millimeter lens at f/22, taken from the rock sitting at the bottom of the falls. And it's relatively easy to access this particular waterfalls. So I would encourage everybody to put this on your list of places to go and see in Georgia. Right off Lake Raven.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Bob. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm wide open to your criticism too. This is a new hobby for me. So hammer away. I have a thick skin. I can take it.
All right. Well, we'll be doing critiques in future weeks, and so certainly encourage you to, you know, join in and participate in that. This week we set up for show and tell, so it's story time. So I won't be ripping apart the photos or anything like that. But well done, and appreciate you submitting here.
Thank you.
Bob, just a quick interruption here, sorry, but Bob, I've got a thought or two. So if you would maybe email me, I'll get your number. I'll reach out to you and we can talk a little bit. I love your photo and I've got some thoughts on it.
Okay, great. I'm anxious to hear that, Mario.
Sure.
All right. Our other Bob.
This was taken out in Colorado. I have been going until the COVID hit on an annual trip with the Niconians group that I belong to. And we get in these vehicles and we go out into the backcountry and try to get there when the sun comes up. It was cold as dickens that day, as you could probably tell by the clouds and the snow in the background. It was a hard image to process, trying to get some of the clouds to come out, and no matter what I did, it just, I mean, it looks surreal, and that's the way it looked. I mean, I was kind of surprised because I was trying to make it not look processed, but it's not processed other than to darken the sky up a little bit with gradual neutral density filter and Lightroom. What you see is pretty much what was there that day.
Bob, did you take that as a panorama? Did you stitch it together as a panorama?
No, that's one image. It's probably, I was trying to find the image in Lightroom to get the specifics on it, but I couldn't find it again. And I think it was taken with the 16-35 f4. And it was probably, that's far enough back that I probably didn't have my mirrorless camera yet. That was probably taken with the D850 on a tripod. Very low ISO, I would guess. I think that D850's base is 100. The exposure was probably, somewhere, more than a second, but it's a longer exposure because the light was not very bright just because of the time of the morning we were there.
Where is that, Bob?
That is in Colorado somewhere. We went, this I think was the year we went out to Grand Junction and we did some things all around the round. As I recall, this is near Ouray, which is I guess a mining town back from the day. It's just kind of quaint. It's right there on a main 2-lane highway, but it's got all kinds of roads going all over the place. Some of them dirt. And we had an SUV and we just started going up this gravel road till it got so narrow that it didn't look like we would be able to turn around. So we kind of backed up a little bit and turned around and went back. I mean, that's just the way it is. I would love to go back there and rent a Jeep for a week and just go.
Yeah, I recognize that mountain. I think that this mountain in the middle to the right is Mount Sneffels.
What's that?
I believe that's Mount Sneffels.
Okay.
It's a 14er. I've actually climbed that particular mountain, and I think this is might be the Silver Dollar Ranch, that dirt road that you're talking about. I recognize this area right here.
Yeah.
Wow.
We had unbelievable color. This wasn't even near the best when we were out there.
Beautiful.
Mario, I'll see if I can find the image in Lightroom because I geotag them and I can give you some proximity to where it was.
All right, Tracy, you're up.
Okay. So this was the snow we had last February. And I was at my church for some function we had. And when I came out, I saw, I was behind that tree there. And I saw that golden light coming from that big light that was over there. And I looked over and I saw the light on the little cross and the snow on the ground. And I just knew it was going to make a cool photo because it was real foggy. So I went over there and I crouched. I had on a big black coat and I crouched down, took a whole bunch of different angles. And somebody, this is on Holcomb Bridge Road. It's actually right next door to Ken Hickson's house. And this is Christchurch Norcross, which is on Holcomb Bridge Road in Old Norcross. And so I was crouching there on the ground wearing this black coat. I don't know, 2 different cars stopped and asked me if I was okay. I guess they thought I had like fallen over into the snow and was like a dead body there or something. And I said, oh, no, I'm just taking a picture. And so I loved the moodiness of it. And I wanted it to be even more moody. So I ran it through Topaz Labs and the Liquify. They have like a one that's lines and Liquify. And just to kind of smear the background a little bit more. And I increased the saturation of the orange a little bit as well. So it ended up being picked up. It was on our annual report of the church last year, and they used it again this year. So I guess somebody liked it.
They must like winter, huh?
I'm sure the people that stopped would probably point out that you didn't take one picture, you took many pictures. And so you were in that position for more than a couple seconds.
Yes, I was there crouched, and I'm sure it looked kind of odd. And Ken Hickson says we're not. Was that Ken that says we're nice people here in Norcross, Tracy?
All right, we got one for David here.
Oh, yeah. This was also February of last year. February 8th was our one and only snow day, I think. And this was just beyond the edge of my property going sort of down a hill. And man, I'll tell you, I was just, I don't know, there's something so peaceful about the quiet of a snowy day when the snow just tends to muffle everything and you can't hear very much, and it's just fantastic. And so I came upon this deer, or rather we kind of came upon each other, and I don't remember how far I was. It was 280 millimeters focal length at f8. I don't remember that I took much time to mess around with settings, though. I was so stunned and thrilled. And so you can tell the deer is not happy. This is a prelude to a stomp. So that's one part of my wildlife photography that I don't care for, that sometimes it does stress out the animals. They don't like it when you don't back off. So anyway, it was a thrill.
Thanks, David. All right. This one's Elaine. I don't know. Did we have Elaine on the call here?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I'm insane.
Okay. So I'll move on here then. And then Paul left, so I'll just kind of go through he dropped in two kind of similar feel on these. And Anna, I think she is on, but she's showed up and both messaged us, so let's see if we can get some audio here from her.
I saw a note that she was having trouble with audio. Anna, are you there?
I see she's here, but she's still muted.
All right, well, we can move on to Eric here.
It looks like she's unmuted.
She did unmute. All right, go back.
Anna, are you there? Yeah, she's unmuted, but she was having some difficulties with her audio.
Yeah, I was getting a message that she was having difficulty.
All right, Eric, it's your turn.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, this was the snowfall, February 8th, 11:30 a.m. And I shot it through my neighbor's backyard, and the trees looked pretty nice. And so, let's see, I shot it with a 200 millimeter f3.5 one 320th of a second at ISO 64. And I converted it to black and white. And then I vignetted it a little bit. But it looks like I froze some of the big flakes that were falling at that time. Those spots on the tree trunk there is the falling snow.
Cool. I like the processing here with the contrast in the black and white. Well done.
And I heard I was at with a seminar, and somebody said if you black and white and then you can vignette around the perimeter a little bit, it might bring out the contrast a little more.
Yep.
I don't know if I did it enough.
All right, Stephanie, you're up.
Hello. This was, so I'm from Costa Rica and Georgia, so we don't get that much snow. But I did my grad school at North Carolina, so that was like the first time I ever really saw snow. So this was the little backyard of the house that I had rented with other classmates. So it was like my first experience with snow. So it's an older camera. It's like those digital snapshot ones. But it's one of my favorites that I have, and I use it as a background because it has a good memory attached to it. That's all.
Did you go out and play in it?
I did for a little bit, and then I don't like to get dirty. So
Okay.
too long. And it wasn't that much snow actually. So it looks like I caught it right, not too long after it fell, but it quickly melted.
Ready.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn it back
Good.
over to, I guess, Tracy here, probably.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for your submissions. We alternate the show and tell with the critique, as Brian was saying. So next month will be a critique on aviation photography. So let's see. So now we're ready for our featured speaker of the month, which is Jon Berry. You can see him there in the aviation Hawaiian shirt. Jon grew up in Wichita, Kansas. It's known as the air capital of the world. And he got bitten by the aviation photography bug 44 years ago at a Blue Angel show. And he considers it a true passion. He's also a certified dental lab technician. How do I look?
I see that.
Yeah.
He spent several years taking intraoral photos of dental patients, and he owns a dental lab on Spalding Drive. So that's quite a combination, an aviation photographer and taking pictures of the insides of people's mouths. So he's going to tell you more of his story. So I will just hand it off to you, Jon, and let you take it from there.
Well, first, thank you, Tracy, for inviting me to do this. I wasn't real comfortable because I know after seeing all these pictures, I'm way outclassed. I'm an amateur photographer at best. And that's honestly, I do what I do and hopefully people like it. But yeah, I kind of got started taking intraoral photos for the doctors that we worked for. And as the Las Vegas smile and the Hollywood white trend went in, doctors were asking me to come shoot a lot. And somehow somebody that we knew saw that I was shooting all kinds of other photos. And she said, you've got an eye for photography. Maybe you should try doing some other stuff. And so she gets me a job shooting a fashion show. Now that's not me. I'm not a fashion coach kind of guy. I don't know what I'm doing, but I go and I shoot it, and one thing leads to another. And it's kind of funny. One job introduces you to the next person, and the next person introduces you to the next person. And before you know it, you found yourself in places you didn't even realize. The connection through the fashion show got a introduction to the people over in Marietta, and I can't think, it's like it's not Children and Family Services, but it's an independent company run by Jerry and Bob Barr, if you remember them. And they were hosting the Blue Angels pilots party, and that was they needed a photographer to shoot the pilots party, and for doing it, my payment was photo pit passes, which, you know, yeah, it's like, okay, I'll do that. But I'm jumping way ahead in my story. Let me see about sharing the screen and we'll get started. I appreciate Tracy's help yesterday in getting this put together. I had planned on an 8-minute slideshow, and between the music not probably fitting the moment and the length of the slideshow, we cut it down by half, but we'll get into it and go from there. But let me see if I can share this screen now. Sorry for the ugliness of all of that. And here we go. Now, this is an interesting shot a friend of mine took from inside a B-25 Mitchell bomber. It's a World War II bomber that was used in the Doolittle Raiders run. Now, this particular plane wasn't, but this type of plane was what they flew off of the aircraft carrier to go bomb Japan and let them know that we were here after Pearl Harbor. But the inside padding of a bomber, I don't know if you've been in one. You should, if you get the opportunity over at PDK sometime, go over and at least get a walkthrough of a B-17 or whatever they have over there. It's always interesting. But G.K. Chesterton is one of my favorite guys to pull quotes from, and that one just seemed to fit. When you get to know me and a lot of my aviation photography friends, you'll know that we're all crazy. So this is the office. It beats staring down the throat of a dental patient. A dentist asked me once why I didn't finish my school and become a dentist. And I said, well, frankly, I don't like blood and I don't like spit. You know, this is a much preferred view. You can only get it looking out of the side or the back of an airplane. So this is where I would prefer to be working. Now, I started my photography, really, my dad gave me a Brownie camera or something, a 620 or a 120 or something, when I was about 5 years old. And we had a dark room. And so I could shoot and develop or watch my dad develop the stuff that I'd try to shoot. And of course, none of it was very good. About 66 or 67, I think I was in maybe fifth grade. We went to a camera show and my dad bought this camera for me. It's German made. The Exacta, if you're familiar with it, it was the first SLR camera in production. Single lens reflex. At least that's their claim to fame. Whether it's true or not, I've never researched it. I've just read their literature and that's what they claim. It's a tough one to shoot with. The Zeiss lenses are beautiful. The different things that were available, but it was all manual. You had to learn your exposures and all that. There was no metering. So you start with the Sunny 16 rule and go from there. And we used to buy the film. It was a like the back of a photography magazine would sell large rolls, I think 10-inch rolls of movie film. I think it was 60-25 or something like that. It could be processed color or black and white, but we rolled our own film cans. And so I had unlimited film to shoot, and then we'd go to the darkroom and develop it. And I learned all of that stuff between 5th grade and I guess when I moved out from home. We had that going from all of that time. It's the camera that I did my first aviation shoot. I wasn't much of a photographer. I can honestly say that I've always had a camera in my hands and always taken snapshots, but you know, it's there. In the mid 70s, about 77, a friend of mine, lead guitar player in the band that I was in, invited me to go to McConnell Air Force Base and shoot the Blue Angels. And even though I'd grown up in the air capital, we'd been to air shows around the peripheral, but we never paid to get in one. But I grabbed my camera and a 36 exposure roll of film and thought, this is probably enough film, 36 exposures. This is the only shot on that roll of film that I kept. Everything else is horrid. This one's not even very good. It's blurry. The angels are not real sharp. And the coolest thing about it is the color. It wasn't like that in real life. The notorious thing about those exactas, as the older they got, the more they leaked light. But I like the effect. That's all light leak and the scene of the Blue Angels. And like Tracy looked at it yesterday and says, oh, it looks like an atomic bomb went off. I said, yeah, that's kind of why I like it.
Yeah.
About, I'd say that sat in an envelope for about 10 years. And I finally, when we first moved to Georgia, I finally got up the courage to have it blown up to a 20x30 and printed and matted and framed and went to all that expense and hung it on my living room wall. And I was pretty young and dumb and thought, you know, this is my crowning achievement in aviation photography. So the opportunity to shoot the Blue Angels was an interesting kind of throwback and maybe a chance to reprieve that opportunity that was squandered. So the next four minutes or so will be kind of the images that I have since been shooting. You've seen what I posted to the photography group page. I don't believe very many of these next few shots are anything that I posted to the page. So sit back and enjoy as best you can, and then we'll go from there.
Man. Yeah, that is such fine images, John.
Amazing, very nice.
How'd you get the airplane to go upside down for that one?
Oh, they do that on their own.
I know, I'm just joking. That's awesome.
I had some trouble earlier today, and I thought I had this resolved. This is supposed to go to the next slide, and I don't know why it's not doing it.
Are all these planes part of the Blue Angels?
This plane is a Blue Angel. This
Nice.
is this was at Fort Worth Alliance Air Show, and they were the headline act. But the Blue Angels fly the FA-18 Hornet, and now this year they're flying the Super Hornet, which is going to be a lot of fun because they're faster and louder and have a little bit more capability. And then they also fly the C-130 that they call Fat Albert. And there were a couple of shots of Fat Albert in that slideshow where you saw there were rockets on the side of the airplane helping assist it to take off. They don't do that anymore. They ran out of rockets. But I have flown in that during an air show, and it's still quite a trip. The way they get up to about 3 feet off of the tarmac and fly down the runway, and then at the end of the runway they just pitch straight up.
Wow.
And they go up to about 300 feet or so, and then they just stop, and it just bounces for a second, and then it starts to take off again, and you go totally weightless inside. And if you're not anchored down, you go floating.
Is that right? Wow.
And some of the crew in the back, they'll do somersaults and flips and stuff. The time that I went was over in Tuscaloosa, and it was full of Raptor pilots, F-22 Raptor pilots, and some Marines and some Air Force guys. And they issue you a barf bag, and you need it. Not that on my flight, no one used it, but they made it clear that they didn't want them back.
Oh.
Go figure. I don't know. It was a rough, windy day, and we did the whole routine. And more than a few of those tough military types were looking like they were looking around for their barf bag. Honestly.
Oh, funny.
It was rough. No one got sick, landed, everybody was happy. One of the things my aviation friends did that if you're well accepted, they'll pull pranks or they'll try to cause you a little bit of grief. It's really a lot of camaraderie between us. But two of the guys over in Tuscaloosa, we shot airplanes all morning long. And then they knew that I was going on the Fat Albert flight. So one of them had another guy go over to the greasiest restaurant and get a giant cheeseburger and some
Oh,
fries.
gosh.
And everybody had lunch, not even thinking about that flight. And had I been thinking, I would not have done that. It did not help the enjoyment of the flight. So there's a tip for you right there. Don't eat before a flight if you get to go on something like that. It's similar to when we did the not the Blue Angels, the Doolittle Raiders reunion in Ohio. We had 17 B-25s for formation flight. And that morning it was supposed to be calm. And it was on the way over from Urbana over to Dayton, where the museum is. That morning, everybody had breakfast burritos.
Oh, no.
we knew it was calm air. No big deal. On the way back, the sun had heated up enough air to make it a very rough flight back there. And so I guess I'm the kind of guy that has to learn a lesson twice.
I really enjoy going to, I'm assuming, John, you've probably been there, to Patriots Point in South Carolina. That was awesome to see those aircrafts up close with their presentation that they have on that. They have a bunch of different aircrafts, but I don't know if anyone's been out there, but if you ever do go to Charleston, that's a great place to see planes.
Yeah, there's a big show at, is it Beaufort? Is that how you say it? Beaufort?
Yeah, it's right across the river. So it could be like considered a different city at that point. I'm not sure.
There's a big show coming up in the spring. I'm sorry I don't have the dates, but that's a show that I've always meant to go to. I seem like I've gone to just about every show there is, but yeah, that's huge. That's a great place just to visit. You know, the Navy has such a facility in that area, and yeah, it's worth going to. So anyway, this is Fifi. There are two of these. This is a B-29 bomber built by Boeing. It was the type of airplane that was used in the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Oh.
And a friend of mine called up and said, "Hey, John, you want to come shoot this? It's going to be on the ramp in a couple of days. Be there early." And I'm not an early person. I work late at night and, you know, stay out late at night. And I never see, you know, to me, an early morning is 11. Had to be there at 5:30 at the latest.
Wow.
And there were about, believe it or not, there were about 40 other photographers, aviation photographers right there. And all of us kind of respected our space and kind of hung back and let everybody kind of shoot this airplane. And the sky was incredible and the light was wonderful. I had a flash unit and I did not bring my tripod, because one of the things we kind of make fun of as photographers that bring tripods to shoot airplanes. It's kind of a smug thing that we do. You know, you're not a pro photographer unless you have a tripod. So they say. But I just don't bring one. So essentially I laid on the tarmac and shot up, and you can see how the flash, which did absolutely nothing for the shot except light up the tarmac a little bit, and maybe the reflectiveness of the strip over there. But I'm kind of pleased with this one. I had it printed, and I'm involved in the 8th Air Force Historical Society, or was. Unfortunately, all of the 8th Air Force guys that flew in World War II have now passed away. The last one about a month ago. But we had monthly meetings, and one of the meetings, one of our guest speakers was Dutch Van Kirk, who was the navigator on the Enola Gay.
Wow.
So I had the honor of giving him a print of this shot in exchange for him signing my print with his signature. So it was a nice little trade in my mind. I thought it was nice. Now Dutch has since passed on as well. And
Why did
I
you
don't
have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do this shot?
the light, you know,
Just the light?
with photography, everything is the light. And we call early morning shots sweet light. And it usually runs from just before sunup until maybe 7:30 or 8 in the morning.
Okay.
And then again in the afternoons, depending on the time of year, but half an hour, 45 minutes before sunset to about a half an hour after sunset. And so you'll see a lot of my shots have this kind of dramatic lighting. The worst lighting you can have is the middle of the day for just about any kind of photography. You
Right.
have to work for a decent shot. But that's why we get up early, is you get the saturated color in the sky, you get long shadows. That is, it's just sweet light. I don't know what else to say.
I think they also call those the golden hours too.
Yeah, that's also called golden hour.
Do those fly?
The Fifi, the B-29 was the only one flying at the time of that photo. And they have since restored Doc, which is stationed out in Wichita. It's another B-29 and it flies. And sometimes they even fly together, which is pretty special. I believe they're planning to fly a couple of shows this year, and almost certainly will fly at Oshkosh. And if you don't know, Oshkosh AirVenture, EAA, the Experimental Aircraft Association, puts on a week-long air show and community for aviators. And it's unlike anything you've ever seen in your life. It is acres and acres and acres of airplanes. I think one year there were 12,000 private
Good
pilots
Lord.
that flew in.
Wow.
Some of them fly in on seaplanes. There's a lake and there's a seaplane base. And then all of the big shows, all of the major performers for the air shows, they're always there. And it runs from Sunday to Sunday. And back in the back, they have different areas for different types, the warbird area or the antique area. And there's just amazing things that you can see. And if you're a pilot and if you're a home builder, they've got workshops and all kinds of stuff back in there. It's just huge. And they put you through seminars on how to polish a piston the right way, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. It's worth going to, and it's crowded like you would not believe. And the amazing thing is you won't find a blade of grass out of order. There's never any trash or cigarette butts on the ground. Everybody's respectful, and it's just a pleasant experience if you don't mind crowds, but it is crowded. So anyway, moving on to this particular slide, you'll notice almost all of my prop airplanes have a full circle on the prop. That is what we strive for. You want it to be as sharp as you can get it. You don't want a blurry image just to get a full circle. Like a Mustang or a Pitts or something like that, they're going to have different shutter speeds that will get you that circle. And it's typically like for a Mustang taking off or flying, it's going to be around 1/80th of a second. Whereas with the Pitts, it's going to have a little faster engine speed. So you can go up to 1/125th, maybe even 1/150th. You get too much above that and you start getting what looks more like a Maltese cross, and it's acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that shot. The thing you don't want to do is take a picture of a prop airplane where the propeller is frozen, because then it looks like it's hanging by strings in the air. It just doesn't look good. It can be sharp as a tack. And for all of the photographer rules that we ever learned about photography, sharp is the key, but you also want the effect. The background blur is important, and the propeller. Helicopters are tough. Helicopters with a lot of blades, like I don't remember exactly what I said that shutter speed was. I think it was 1/15 of a second. And I could have gone up to 1/125th or 1/25th and made it a little sharper and not have so much overlap. If you look at that picture, there's some gray bands there, and that's just overlap. And I could have gone with a little faster shutter speed and still got a full circle on it. But that's what you want to do. The magazines love it. If you're going to submit magazines for print, submit your shots to magazines for print, they're going to love that. They're not going to love it if it's blurry. They probably won't use it. This shot of Glamorous Gal, the Mustang, it's one of my favorites, even though the nose of it is a little bit less focused than the tail. And we've had discussions in aviation groups about why that is, why the front of the plane will be sharp and the back will be off, or vice versa. And I have yet to, when you're out there standing on the line trying to get shots, it's a hard problem to cure. This one's a little soft on the nose, but it's razor sharp on the tail. And as long as you can read the fine print on the tail, I'm good with it. I'm happy.
What aperture do you usually use?
I let it float. I shoot shutter priority almost all of the time when I'm shooting, because I want to control the shutter speed to control, what I'm getting out of the prop. It can be dependent on the light, anywhere from f4 to f22 or whatever. One of the drawbacks of high aperture f22 or f18 or I'm here, these are airplane numbers, f11, anything above f8, if you have a dirty sensor, every spot that's on your sensor is going to show up against that blue sky. So if you can use a neutral density filter to help have a wider aperture, that'll work. Typically, we have too much light in the middle of a nice air show day. And air shows, we always complain we want them to be later in the day, but they always schedule the show to start at noon and end at 4. So it's the worst light possible. And almost every airport that I've ever shot from, the sun is in the wrong angle, and it's either backlit or just the light is just awful most of the time. So it's a challenge. It's really a challenge to come away with decent shots.
Do you have issues with the metal as well reflecting?
No, I mean, depending on the angle it is to the sun. My biggest issue is if I'm holding the 500 millimeter above my head and looking through the viewfinder and following the plane go by, and it crosses the sun, you get blinded pretty quickly. Because if you get the sun in your lens, it's brutal. It's really brutal. So after a while, you get used to that. As a new photographer, as somebody's new to aviation photography, that's a warning. Be aware of where the sun's at, because you really don't want to look at it through a high magnification. So what most of us in the aviation community will tell new photographers is start at 250, get shots that are keepers, because you're going to get a little bit of prop blur at 250. And once you're sure you've got some keepers, work it down a little bit, go to 1/125th, take some shots, try to get some keepers. Honestly, anything below that early on in your aviation career, you might get one in every 20 shots that might be considered keepable. There's a lot of stuff that's just thrown away. And even with those of us who are very experienced at this, we do throw away an awful lot of images. I was telling Tracy yesterday, a typical air show, my 36 roll exposure roll of Kodacolor has been expanded now to usually between 3,500 and 5,000 images a day.
Wow.
And her first response was, I guess that was on burst mode. And a lot of people do use burst mode. We don't. The guys that I work with typically don't. We prefer to single shot those 5,000 images. Burst mode is kind of a spray and pray. You might get it, you might not. And I find my keeper rate, is just about as good using techniques that I've learned from shooting guns or just shooting photography and hand holding. And like I say, we don't use tripods, and we kind of smirk at people that do. There's always somebody that's out there with a tripod and a gimbal, but honestly, you don't want to stand there with a 12-pound camera rig holding it above your head for 6 or 7 hours and then add the weight of even the lightest fiber carbon tripod. You're adding 2 to 4 more pounds to that rig. And I can tell you from experience shooting one of the older 600s all day at Oshkosh, by around 3 p.m, I knew I had another hour to go, and I felt like my arms were coming out of their sockets. It hurt. I'd do a burst, going across, a pass, and I'd drop my camera on the ground and just put it down and just let my shoulders rest for a second. And I would look at it and I would dread having to pick it up for the next pass. It hurt like crazy. And I will always forever thank my friend who checked that 600 lens out of the Canon house at Oshkosh for me to use that day. I guess he was a baptism of fire. It was my first year at Oshkosh. I knew I didn't want to buy a 600, so I bought a 500, which is quite a few pounds lighter. And shooting with a 500 with a 1.4 on it is such a joy by comparison. I can shoot all day and half the night with it. And then my trusty 300 2.8 with a 1.4 on it. It's heavy, but it's like no big deal. The rule in photography has always been your shutter speed has to equal or be faster than the focal length of your lens. So if we're shooting a 500 millimeter lens with a 1.4 teleconverter added into a 1.3 crop body, which is what the 1D Mark III, Mark IV, and I believe the 10, you're talking about somewhere between 700 and 900 millimeters. You're supposed to have 1/1000th of a second to get a sharp shot. I've been in bird forums where people shoot a lot of birds and been told that what we do is impossible. It can't be done. Okay, come join us someday on a flight line and we'll show you. It's fun. It's a challenge. And for me, it was a personal challenge to do that. So we'll move on.
What camera do you shoot with?
I have 3. I haven't updated my cameras in several years. They're getting kind of long in the tooth. I have a 5D Mark II that I mostly bought to use for portraits and weddings and that kind of stuff that I try to avoid at all costs. Although it comes in handy, again, I do some corporate headshots and that kind of stuff as well. So it's a nice full frame, very rich camera. Most of my aviation photography, I shoot with a 1D Mark IV. And now I've added to that a 7D Mark II, which when it came out, Scott Kelby was saying that it's the little brother of the 1DX. And I didn't want to spend $8,000 on a new 1DX. So I bought the 7D Mark II and I love it. $1,400. And this was when Showcase was still open. And when I bought that camera, they loaded me up with all kinds of stuff just to get me out the door. I mean, they gave me a printer and some big cards and extra batteries and a polishing cloth. I mean, they filled up a box full of stuff when I bought that 7D Mark II. Don't know why, but I took it. Anyway, F8 and B there, it's well known. It's often attributed to Ansel Adams. It was actually Arthur Fellig that did it, that made that a quote. And we live by it. You have to get to the air show early. Air shows open the gates typically 8 or 9 o'clock. That's too late because Sweet Light's over. So you develop relationships, you get to know people that run the shows, and you get in early the shot in the middle of the lineup of the Thunderbirds, the F-15s and the F-18s. That was at Fort Worth Alliance, and I was on the official photo team to shoot that show. And so I was in at dawn, and the Fort Worth Alliance people are very thoughtful. It's a good show to go to. They will sell you a ticket to come out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and me or one or the other people, there were 2 other people when I was doing it. I don't do it anymore. We would take a group of 10 or 12 people and take them around. They have a huge static display of all their different airplanes that are going to fly, plus some that don't fly. And so we would basically escort them around and let them shoot at will. And it's a great deal if you want to get in early and get those kinds of shots. It's the same thing. I knew the organizers at the Tuscaloosa show. So the Corsair down in the corner, we were walking around, there were about 4 or 5 of us walking around just shooting these old warbirds. And I saw that scene with the tower in the back and the sun coming up. And I mean, it's just, you got to be there. You can't expect to get a shot like that if you come out when the gates open. Similarly, the other shot here, I think that's a Bearcat. I'm not real good about the names of some of the old warbirds. That was shot next to Fifi the same morning. There was a P-51 Mustang, and then this, and then Fifi. So that was just from another angle that same morning as the B-29. But you got to make the effort to be there. Typically shows don't start until around noon, but there's a lot of flying that goes on from about dawn until noon. There's plenty to shoot. And I'll kind of jump ahead in the advice thing. And you're not going to get a spot on the fence line if you're not there early. It fills up really quick. And when a bunch of us photographers shoot together, we kind of rope off a little area, because typically if I've got 3 camera bodies and lenses, I have a 100 400 on the 5D. The 300 would go on the 1D Mark IV. No. Yeah, the 1D Mark IV. And the 500 would go on the 7D. You can only hold one at a time. So you got 2 very expensive rigs at your feet. And when the crowd comes in for the air show, you're going to find little kids are going to come in and trample on your lenses or on your cameras, or kind of kick them around. They're, it's just not fun. And they will invariably crowd in around you. One time at an air show, I had a whole troop of Boy Scouts, which are supposed to be good kids. They just crowded right in front of all of us, and we'd been there all day. What do you do? But you could have, I think we estimated at Oshkosh, there were about 10 of us shooting together, maybe 12. And we had close to $200,000 worth of camera gear laying at our feet. So eventually we got to where we would bring police tape and tape off our chairs and just not let people get into that area. Because it's just too expensive. Too much danger of getting things broken.
John, since you're there early, do they let you get near the aircraft to take like underbelly shots or any kind of unique perspective shots?
It depends on where they have them parked. Some of the air shows have a nice static area where they're parked and you can walk right up to it and touch them if you want to. And yes, you can get those kinds of shots. In the case of the Thunderbirds, the Blue Angels, or the F-15 demo team or the F-16 demo team, you can't get out to where that's at typically. Now, my partner and I, when we would shoot the Air Alliance show, we had an all access pass. We could be out there from every angle, but that's such a rare situation. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was you can get yourself into a lot of trouble venturing out onto a tarmac. It's against FAA law. It's against the rules of the air show. The air boss will get mad and have you thrown out. So you have to be very respectful of where they say that you can go and where you can't go. If there's a fence line, typically you can't cross it unless you're being escorted by someone with more badges than a typical photographer would have. The longer you're in the aviation shooting thing and the more people you get to know, those rules aren't relaxed, but with the right people and the right access, and you show yourself to be a responsible person, you can get out there. I have seen highly qualified professional photographers do stupid stuff because one of the aviation aerobatic teams wants some shots of them coming down the runway during the air show. And they say, it's okay, I'll give you one of our passes and you'll have all access. And then the photographer wanders out there to the ramp, and no air boss in the world is going to allow that. And I've seen guys get thrown out of air shows and banned for life for doing that kind of stuff. One of the experiences at Tuscaloosa one year, there was a guy who was a concert photographer, and he wanted to get into aviation photography. And the guys down at Showcase gave him my name because they had seen my work and said, this guy knows what he's doing and he'll help you. So he shows up at Tuscaloosa, introduces himself, and I try to help him, show him different things about, shutter speeds and all that. By the end of the day, he was feeling so comfortable that if you saw at the end of that slideshow that Jane Wicker was hanging by her legs from underneath an airplane as it was going by, she had finished her routine and come up, and they usually taxi their airplane up close to the crowd line, and then they get out and shake hands across the fence. Well, this guy just jumps over the fence and goes out there to talk to her and get some close-up shots like he would a celebrity like B.B. King or the Eagles or somebody. He just about got thrown out of that one. I had to go get him. You got to be careful. You got to know the rules. You got to know what's allowed, what's not allowed. And you only do that by getting to know people, asking a lot of questions, being respectful. If you don't know whether you can do it, don't do it, because odds are you can't around an airport. It's just dangerous. I was one of the few people who submitted images to the FAA and the NTSB when Greg Cannell crashed his plane at PDK. I had the images from his descent into the ground and across the infield. And the guy I was shooting with was chimping at the time. He wasn't even watching the show. He was looking at his camera. As it unfolded, I just kept saying, no, no, no. Things can turn quickly. You don't want to be where you shouldn't be, because if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's ugly. And over the years, Jane, the girl hanging underneath the wing, she died. Amanda Franklin died. There's a list of about 10 of my friends. So you're very much aware of what goes on and what can go wrong. And so you're walking around things with props. A photographer a couple of years ago backed into a spinning prop and
Oh, gosh.
it did not end well. So yeah, you got to be careful. I'm going to move on, get off of this one.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
can you talk for a moment? If you go back to a previous slide, like the Dauntless in the lower right corner, can you talk a little bit about exposure and dynamic range? It looks like, the plane actually looks like it's front lit, but obviously the sun's behind it. It just seems like the dynamic range is extraordinary. So I'm kind of curious, is the sky just not really that bright at sunrise?
I used flash to light the front, and I tried to balance what flash I had with the available light coming from the back. And it was pretty dark, but it looks lighter than it actually was. And obviously I do, there's two schools of thought. There's people that don't believe in, you take it out of the camera because that's how it's supposed to be. And I lived that life for a long time. And when I learned Photoshop, I learned that you can do all kinds of cool things controlling light, that you're not creating things that aren't there, but you are bringing out things that are there. Now, I don't know how to back up this slide thing without jumping in and out. So just to answer that question, I'm sure it was front flash, backlight, and then some Photoshop tricks to help bring up the shadows. As far as dynamic range and all of that, I almost always shoot at 100 ISO, no matter what time of day it is. And here it is right in front of me. I shot 400 ISO because, believe it or not, that F4U Corsair, it was pretty dark. It was about 7:30 or so, and it was getting dark. It was in October. So I bump it up, in low light, I'll bump up the ISO to 400 or so, but that's as high as I want to go because I don't want a lot of noise. The other shot of the Blue Angel there, it was getting dark and the clouds were absolutely gorgeous. And then the reflection in the paint of the Hornet. So I bumped that up. I'm not sure, I can't see because the image is blocked over there. I can't see what the ISO is. Maybe y'all can, but
it's 100.
Is it
100? Yeah,
I believe it.
F7.
Yeah, we were just wandering around and we saw a photo op and took it. The advantage of having a pass at Fort Worth for me. If you ever shoot the Blue Angels, now the new Hornets may be different, but the old Hornets look up close, look like they were painted with a broom. They were really ugly, but up in the air, they're beautiful. The paint jobs were disappointing. Conversely, the Thunderbirds are beautiful. Up close or far away, either way, the paint jobs are as good as any brand new Cessna Citation or Learjet. They're absolutely stunning. But that particular F-18 right there was, and all of them in the line, they're rough. Looks like an old car had been painted with a mop or a broom. So anyway, let me move on. We've kind of already hit all the gear and some of the techniques we'll touch on. I believe that's the 800, the Canon 800. My friend over in Fort Worth owned it. He spent the $12,000 for it and dropped it off the back of the golf cart a number of times, and it still worked. But I could use it at will, and it's a lot of fun to shoot with a lens that big, but it collects so much heat waves that it's almost unusable in the wrong conditions. But boy, I tell you what, it will isolate an image and make it beautiful. The middle picture is me sitting in the back of a B-25 Mitchell. That's what we would do. We'd take the tail guns out, and those air-to-air shots of the B-25 Mitchells was shot from that position. We wear a tether on a climbing harness or a safety harness, because that particular B-25, the Pacific Prowler, was the photo platform for the movies Tora, 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 and just about all of the Hollywood movies that featured World War II flying. Pardon me. They found out in the early 60s that the photographers that sat back there had to have a harness because 2 of them fell out, and it was not a good way to land. And we work on a short harness because we don't want to fall out and then not be able to get back in. Because once you're out, you're not getting back in. You can't climb back in because of the slipstream and all of that. Which brings me to the right-hand picture. That's me holding one of my cameras out the side port. And if you look real close, there's a bar there just to my left on the outside of the plane that kind of gives you a little bit of space where the slipstream doesn't catch the camera. And I was trying to get some trailing shots of another plane behind us. Not a wise thing to do. And one of my cohorts in crime on another photo mission found out, this was at Fort Worth Alliance. Her boss, Ross Perot Jr., was flying his jet behind the B-25, and she leaned out of that porthole and almost lost her camera. She lost the headset off of her head. It went over the wing of his airplane, and it ripped a rubber band out of her hair. And the rubber band went into one of his engines, and it cost him about $10,000 to replace the engine, just from a rubber band that was holding her hair. One of those little rubber things. You don't want to do it. You learn things as you go, and typically they'll give you a briefing of things not to do. So she learned the hard way that her boss had to buy a new engine. She didn't get fired. She was nervous and cried for hours, scared to death that something horrible was going to happen to her job. And believe it or not, Ross Perot Jr. is a pretty good guy. And he says, these things happen. I understand. Don't worry. And she still works for him. So one of those kind of things. You got to be aware of your surroundings at all times. My camera there is wrapped around my wrist with the strap about 4 times. Now, the stupid thing is, if it caught the slipstream just right, it would have yanked me through that porthole. And I'm not a small guy. So there's that. Now, general information, shooting techniques. I'll start with the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds and the Snowbirds, the jet teams. They all have a crossing pattern. One of the things where a plane comes from both ends and they cross in the middle. You want to position yourself as close to the middle as you can. And one of the tricks to getting that, and the idea is to get them either crossing or right above each other, or both of them at least in the frame. Really hard to do because they're coming at each other about 700 miles an hour. And you have to pick which one you want to shoot and track that one. You want to pan with one of them. Obviously, you can't pan with both of them. And probably your shutter speed should be up around 1/2000th just to stop motion, get a good chance. Because if you're coming this way, the guy going the other way is going to be twice as blurry. Now, the trick to timing it just right is I tend to shoot with both eyes open anyway on just about everything I do. It's just a habit that I've developed. So if I'm going to track the guy coming from the right, I'll be shooting through my left eye and watching for movement out of the corner of my right eye. And as soon as I start detecting movement, I'll start clicking the shutter. And typically I'll get some shots of it just by himself. And then if I time it just right, and it's all kind of happenstance, I'll get them. And I've gotten quite a few shots where it's the shot that I'm going for. But that's the trick, is watching for that movement out of the corner of your eye and then starting to shoot, because you don't want to be shooting and panning with only one airplane and not know where the other one's at. The other thing, a technique with shooting with big lenses, particularly, anything the 300 or larger, every little movement amplifies blurriness, especially when you're shooting at low shutter speed. Now, I'll shoot jets anywhere from 1/300th up to 1/2000th. And the higher it goes, the easier it is to get the shot. When it's down low, if you want to blur a background or you want to make the clouds look dreamy behind it, 300. The trick is, let me grab a small camera. I don't know if this is going to translate well, but you got your finger on the shutter speed, and a lot of people are going to want to click it. When you're hand holding something, you're going to ever so slightly, if you're just pushing the button, you're going to give it a little motion like that. But what you do, you roll your finger across that button. You don't actually push the button, you roll it across the button. It's very gentle, very smooth, and you just put enough pressure on it to make it trip the shutter. That's probably one of the best tips anybody ever gave me, was just rolling your finger across the shutter instead of,
Yeah, thank you.
That'll do wonders for sharpening things up. Air-to-air photography has its own set of rules, but you don't need long lenses. The longest you'll ever use is a 70-200 or something in that range. Most of it will be a 24-105 or a 16-35 or something like that. And I'm talking in Canon, the Canon structure. I'm not sure what the numbers are on Nikon anymore. I used to shoot Nikon back in the film days, but I've been shooting digital with Canon ever since. So.
And you say those lenses will be the ones you'd use for what?
For air to air
shots.
If you have the opportunity to shoot air to air, you want shorter focal length. You just don't need big ones. If you know your photo mission is going to be in bumpy air, there's a thing called a Kenyan gyro. It's like a double axis gyroscope that bolts onto the tripod mount at the bottom of your camera, and one of the gyros spins one way and another one spins the other way, and it'll hold your camera almost as still as if you're on a tripod. It's not good for trying to pan because it wants to hold your camera still. If you try to pan, you're going to fight with it. But it's very good for if you get a chance to shoot from a helicopter or in rough air. They're very handy. You can rent them from the company that sells them, but they're about $3,000-$4,000. So rental is a more affordable option. I think that you can rent them for a weekend for maybe $500. It's been a while since I've looked into it, but if you need it and it's a paying shot and you have to get the shot, I'd say get one. The fortunate thing for me is I know a couple of guys that have them, and if they're not using them, they don't mind to loan them. So I've never bought one. Although I'm a gadget guy, I'd rather buy a new guitar than a Kenyan gyro. I'll use it a whole lot more. Breathing. If you've ever done any competitive shooting or hunted birds on the wing, you know that or if you shot in the military, you have to control your breathing. Slow inhale, slow exhaust, because every motion makes a difference and it's translated to some sort of distortion through the glass. So breathing's important. Obviously, if you're going to shoot with big glass, I told you my arms felt horrible after shooting all day with a 600. You work out upper body exercises just to build strength, curls and lifts and, all the normal upper body kinds of things that you're going to do, because you want to build up these top muscles in here, and then your arm and shoulder muscles. And then exercises, if you're a golfer, which I like to play golf, that helps because you're twisting your core. And when you're shooting an airplane coming at you at 400 miles an hour, and you start over there and you end over there, you have to basically turn with the plane through the middle of your core. So your core has to be strong. You need to exercise that so that you can do that smoothly. Here you are, I'm telling you, don't move, but here's a situation when you're panning, you can't just flip your wrist to pan. You have to basically move your whole body with the plane and try to keep up with it as you go. A lot of my photographer friends that shoot on the fence line have given up trying to get the full disc, because obviously it's hard and it's not required for what they submit. They submit their photos to World Air Show News, and the editor at World Air Show News is more particular about sharp shots than he is getting full discs. So if it's got movement on the prop and it's sharp, he's happy. They're happy. They don't have to work so hard. Me, I'm a masochist, I guess. I just want to push myself to the limit with every time I'm out there. And I feel like if I come away with a bunch of shots that are less than a full disc circle, I have failed for the day. I beat myself up psychologically over it. So it's just one of the quirky, crazy things about me. When I go out there, I want to get the shot. And if I don't get it, I tried. But if I go out there and I waste an opportunity in an air-to-air, or if I waste an opportunity from a prime shooting position, like, I'd get passes to get up on the tower at PDK, both the low one and the high one. You don't want to waste those shots. You want to get the shot. So you got to practice. And, typically a couple of us will go over to PDK before the air show season starts and just start shooting takeoffs and landings from the little bleacher stand over there. It's really handy. And there's some interesting stuff that flies in and out of there. And the people at PDK are typically pretty photo friendly. They're not going to give you a 2 hours of a time, even if you stay and shoot like I have until 11 o'clock when the airport closes. I mentioned dirt spots. Believe it or not, if you shoot a lot of weddings and you shoot a lot of portraits and just different things where you're shooting with f5.6 or even up to f8, you're not going to see a lot of dirt spots on your prints. But if you get a scope and look at your sensor, if you've changed lenses a lot, you would be surprised. It looks like your garden. It's so much dirt on your sensor. You don't see it because you can't. But when you get a f22 or f18 f-stop, that is so sharp that it is actually picking up the dirt on the sensor. And it shows every one of them. I've sat with a beautiful shot that had so much dirt on the sensor. I sat with the cloning tool and cloned out over 100 dirt spots just to save that shot. I learned quickly how to use sensor cleaner and sensor swabs and all of that. And typically at a big air show like Oshkosh, or even one of the local shows that goes 2 or 3 days, I'll clean my sensor every night. Where most photographers I know that don't shoot aviation, they might clean their sensor once a year. And it's only because you don't want to have that battle, because it's an uphill battle otherwise. Now, my friend out in Dallas, Fort Worth, he convinced me that the simple answer is just never take your lens off of your body at an air show. And that's sage advice. Every time you open up your body, whether your camera's on or off, you're going to collect everything from the dust that blows around to the Corvus oil that they burn for the smoke and everything in between. And you don't want Corvus oil on your sensor. It's really hard to get off. So we just made it a rule. If I bring 3 cameras, I'm going to have 3 lenses all day long. And if I do have to change lenses, I will do that back at a hangar somewhere where I'm out of the wind. Enough of that. Let's see. The other thing is, as you build friendships and you have this camaraderie on the fence line, they're going to watch your back. You will find time in the middle of the day. If you've been there from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 in the afternoon or later, you're going to need to go use the bathroom. You're going to want to go grab something at the concession stand. And trust me, you don't want to carry a 500, a 300, a 1.4, and a backpack into a Johnny on the spot. It makes things very difficult because you really, I'm in the dental field. I'm very conscious about infection control things. I don't want to put anything down in those places. I don't even want to touch anything. That said, have friends, make friends, trust your friends to leave the gear with them while you go do what you have to do or go to the concession stand. I have one of those rapid straps. It's a double rapid strap, and I can carry both cameras with me, both the 300 and the 500. And like at Oshkosh, I'll carry that with me because there's so much going on. There's never a break. And I can turn around, and with the 500, at least I can reach out and grab a shot, while I'm going to the concession stand. But I've had people just blindly walk right into me and knock the lens off the camera body. Got to be aware of your surroundings. You got to be careful. What else?
Don, I don't want to interrupt you because it's all been wonderful, but we are about out of time. So I don't know if you had any other wrap up kind of comments that you wanted to make.
Simply mentors. For me, it was Jim Wilson down there on the left with the big lenses, and I'm holding the 600 in my left hand there, and he's got his 800 next to it. My dad, who basically got me started, I took him to a show called Mustangs and Legends, Gathering of Mustangs and Legends, and he had never shot with a digital camera before, and he had a blast. He had the 100, 400 and that, and he shot. And then Paul Bowen, who's arguably one of the finest aviation photographers in the business, who I've known him since his hair was much longer than that. We were hippies together back in the 70s. And he's him and Jim Wilson basically have mentored me and taught me a lot of what I know about this. They share their time abundantly. They're very, very good guys. Paul is a multiple Canon Explorer of Light Award winner, and he's the only photographer to have been inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame, ahead of Harrison Ford and somebody else big. I can't think who it was right now. A couple of years ago. He's a big deal, and he's got books out that you can get, and he sells calendars every year. He's based in Wichita, Kansas, and he's a member of the ISAP, International Society of Aviation Photographers. I suggest, if you're interested in doing this, if you want to have some fun, go to an ISAP meeting. They hold one a year. It's a big meeting. They take you somewhere cool where you're going to get to shoot cool stuff. There's a Mustang air-to-air group on fredmiranda.com. Some of the best aviation photography you will ever see is posted there, and it has millions of images, literally. And then you can go to the World Air Show News website, and you will see a lot of images that they use. They use some of them in the magazine that comes out every other month. But this is where you're going to meet people. This is where you're going to get to know people that can show you the ropes and teach you things. It's a small fraternity. There's not that many of us. Honestly, photographers are literally the redheaded stepchild of the aviation crowd. Air bosses don't like us. Air show organizers don't like us. because there's always that one guy that's going to screw thing up for everybody else. So we all have a black eye from it, but over time you can build respect and rapport, and with the right mentors in your corner, you'll be able to get some shots that you'll really be proud of and want to hang on your wall or even sell or submit to magazines. ISAP has all of the major editors and publishers from all of the major aviation photographers or aviation photography magazines. They're all there at ISAP meetings. It's a great place to get to know people. And that's all I have except for additional Q&A. But thank you for your time. I hope I didn't ramble too broadly, but
No, I enjoyed it, John. Yeah.
If I haven't
Thank you,
answered
John. It was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Fantastic,
Tracy, do we have
John. Thank you.
time for any Q&A?
Yeah, let me just do the quick wrap, and then if people want to hang back because we are over our time. Our speaker next month is going to be Billy Howard. If you Google billyhoward.com, you'll see he's a very famous photographer here in the Southeast especially. And he's going to be talking about how to create personal projects out of your work. And he has been shooting for many decades and shot all kinds of very famous people, but also very ordinary people facing extraordinary times. Let's see, that's going to be on March 11th. And our photo submission theme for next month will be aviation photography. So take some of the tips, stay away from the propellers, and take some of the tips that John's given us, and go to PDK if nothing else, and shoot some planes going overhead. Those will be due on Saturday, March the 6th. So I'll adjourn the meeting officially now, but if anybody wants to hang back and ask John any questions, feel free to do so. And thanks again so much, John, for your time and preparation.
You're welcome.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, John.
Hey, John. My name is Mario Lombardi John, and I'm one of the members of the club and on the board. And I really enjoyed your presentation very much and your images. I think you've had a good time in your career. It sounds like to me. It looks like you really love what you do.
It is a labor of love. One of the issues is it's expensive. Those lenses don't come cheap, and you know, and honestly, you know, there's not that much money in it unless you are one of the top guys. I know that Paul makes a good six-figure income, and Jim does a lot of real estate as well, and he's in the mid six figures. But that's rare. With photographers, you know, most of the time we're offered opportunities to shoot for the exposure, and you know, that doesn't pay the bills.
Like musicians, right?
Exactly.
So my question is this, do you ever use on any of your images where you don't like the sky or the clouds, have you ever used any texture blending? I know that's sometimes, I've seen some aviation photography with texture blending that was very effective, but I don't know if you've ever done it.
I think the closest, since I'm not a Photoshop whiz, I only know what I've picked up from other people and what I've experimented with. The closest thing to texturing the clouds or bringing out more texture was Nik Define. It's a plugin you can get that works in Photoshop, and basically you can put a spot up in the middle of a bunch of clouds like what's in the background here, right under the thank you on that screen, and you can hit the structure slider and pull the structure over and define the clouds just about any way you want to. And I know one guy that will take and make a real small circle of the airplane on a spot on the airplane and structure it, and then copy that circle and drag it all the way down the fuselage, and just he gets some of the most stunning detailed shots. Of course, anything to the excess can be a problem. And if you overdo it, it looks like it's, over structured. But if you're careful, that tool in Nick Define is wonderful. I've just recently purchased Topaz sharpener and denoise, and I'm not done enough with them to know whether I like them or not. But so far, sharpen looks like it's the better tool, but you don't have that ability, as far as I can tell, to randomly go into an area here, and bring something up and give it a little more structure. So, and with the last upgrade to Photoshop, I lost the capability of using the Nick suite of stuff. So unless I want to restart my computer in an old operating system and go back and use it, it's kind of fallen by the wayside unless I buy it again. And I'm cheap. I don't want to buy software I've already bought. One thing I didn't mention was, I don't know how many of you micro adjust your lenses, but that's a very good thing to do, especially with these big lenses. And my first attempt at micro adjusting was with an old, let me put this up here, thermometer. You put it at a 45-degree angle to your lens. You focus on a middle point, and you look at what your result is. And if you can tell if your camera's front focusing or back focusing, and you can adjust so that you're spot on. After I got tired of doing that for a while, I went out and bought one of these really expensive ones. It's basically the same thing. It's just a grid, a scale.
Yeah.
And it really does make a difference. And if you have lenses, like I had a 24-70, I couldn't use it on f2.8. It was a f4 all the way. Even though it went to f2.8, you couldn't use it until I micro adjusted the lens, and then it worked fine. So it's useful for all of them.
All right. Well, we'll catch you later.
All right.
Thank you.